and welcome to It's Not So Lonely at the Top podcast. It's for business owners, leaders and high performers who know success can be both rewarding and challenging. I'm your host, Pete Rushmer, and each week I sit with brilliant people. They're people who have led, who have built, who have failed, who have recovered, grown and learned what leadership really takes behind the scenes. It's not a highlight reel conversation. We talk about decisions, doubts, pressures, purpose, resilience, and the lessons that shape us. Leadership doesn't have to be lonely with the right conversations, and that is all it takes to remind you you're not the only one carrying the weight. Let's get into it. I have mega imposter syndrome today because I have Katie on today's podcast. Katie Allen is a leadership confidence coach, specialist inclusion consultant and host of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. With a background in commercial leadership and HR, she understands the unique tensions and challenges faced by modern workplaces and helps teams navigate tricky or divisive topics with confidence, talking with you, not at you. Her goal is to empower forward-thinking leaders with the confidence to have the conversations that matter. Big round of applause for Katie. Katie, what a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Oh, Pete, fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well.
Good. And how's your podcast, Speaking of Inclusion? What sort of audience have listened to the podcast?
Oh, I love my podcast. It is an absolute passion project of mine, and it is essentially directed at anybody who wants to get a bit of an insight into some of the more tricky, divisive topics of conversation that are in society. And I basically just get to interview loads of different people who have loads of different experiences. And we learn all about what it's like to be different, to have conversations with people who are different to us. I ask all the kind of really stupid questions that all of us think, but nobody wants to say out loud, so that we can all learn together.
That sounds amazing.
I love it.
Oh, love that. Love that. And we met in the PSA.
We did, the Professional Speaking Association.
Cool. And how long have you been a member of the Professional Speakers Association?
Oh, good question. 3 years now.
Excellent.
I know. And I rocked up and I was a year in, and then I decided to be a regional president. I mean, how vain am I?
Amazing. And you're an award-winning regional president because you then won the award as the best one as well after a year.
I did, regional president of the year. I did. Thank you for saying that.
That's amazing. Award winner. So what do you do when you're not winning awards for being an amazing president and stuff like that?
I just swan around being awesome. No, in all essence, all of the efforts and all of my business activity focuses around how do we get better at having difficult conversations. So I spend my time learning about, different experiences of different people, such as through the podcast. And all of my time is also spent then within businesses, having conversations with leaders and teams to understand what are the dynamics that are going on in their organisations and their specific situations, and what are the conversations they're avoiding or maybe not confident to have, and how can we get people over that.
Amazing. I bet you're a busy woman because there's lots of those conversations that need to be done.
Yes, there really are. And I often have to remind myself as well that even when you spend all of your time immersed in this, there's always opportunities for me to learn as well, because you can never know everything about every potential other human on the planet. So it's just this beautiful mix of kind of the work and helping people understand things that I've learned along the way. And I share all my own mistakes as well, because I feel like mistakes are, as we all know, the biggest part of learning. Sure. So I'm perfectly happy to tell everybody about all the things I've got wrong so that they don't have to. And knowing that I'm going to probably continue to get things wrong throughout my career as well. So just being open to learning in that way as well. I'm like a curiosity magpie. So I just love learning, and I love kind of asking questions.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Don't let your coffee go cold.
Thank you.
So the arm kind of swings out and then swings back in again. If you do want to grab your coffee. Luckily for me, it's kind of like right-handed. I can kind of reach for it, but it might be more awkward. I don't know if left hand's
I'm ambidextrous.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, there you go. That's good. So you're all good. So I have prepared some questions for you. But in the meantime, just so the audience get a bit of a better feel for sort of your background, tell us a bit about the journey, sort of what's brought you to this, because you don't just wake up, leave school and go, I'm going to be a leadership and confidence coach and I'm going to talk about these awkward conversations that we could have. So
Do you know my favourite thing about you asking that question is that is the same question I ask all of my guests when they come
Oh,
along.
really?
I was
Right,
like,
okay,
when you were at school, you didn't leave school with your 3 GCSEs thinking you were going to do this. So yeah, absolutely. Very few of us do we? We kind of just fall into our careers, and I'm no exception.
Sure.
So I guess the kind of the bulk of my early career, I actually spent working on oil refineries. So I worked for an industrial cleaning and catalyst handling contracting company. And by the time I kind of got to the end of my 10 years with them, I was running their UK operations. So my background really is in commercial leadership and the running of a contracting company. But it was throughout that work, and as you can, I'm sure, imagine, being a woman working in that industry, it was quote unquote a bit character building. And I had a lot of experiences that I probably shouldn't have had. And it really helped me understand some of the challenges that go on across other, some of the ones I faced were quite extreme, but across other organisations and other industries where perhaps not everybody is made to feel welcome. And I also had to do this kind of internal reckoning where I knew I was part of the problem as much as I was trying to be part of the solution, because I was saying all the words around, we need to create spaces where more women can come into this industry. And at the same time, I was behaving like one of the lads, and I was kind of channeling a lot of my own internalised misogynist behaviours. And I wasn't being the type of leader that I thought I could be. So I had this brainwave when I was kind of given the opportunity to leave that business. By basically making myself redundant, which was one of the perks of being the boss. I thought, I know, I've got it. I'm going to go into HR. I'm going to retrain. I'm going to take everything I know about commercial leadership and all of the people kind of challenges I've managed through that. I will retrain and become HR qualified, and I'm going to be the best HR business partner that any organisation has ever seen. And to my credit, I was pretty good. But I then realised that when I moved into HR, I just became the custodian of all the policies and processes that I didn't enjoy. And it didn't matter how I felt about them. I still had to, use them and enact them. And it was that then led me to believe actually there are better conversations all around that we can be having in businesses. There are better ways that we can come together and have workplaces where people can be their best selves, where they can thrive, where we can be innovative and productive. And I decided, well, at that moment, I thought this is the time to put literally my money where my mouth is and set up my own business to work with organisations that want to do that want to really invest in doing the good work so that they know their people are their best, the people are biggest cost and biggest asset, right? Let's invest in that. Let's channel it. So that's kind of like my trajectory. And so 6 years now I've been doing this for myself. And I really love it. I feel like I've found my, what is it, the ikigai we call it, don't we? Where you find the thing that you're good at and
Ikigai,
yeah.
Dharma.
Yeah.
Bit of Dharma.
Exactly.
Nice.
So that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, nice. So my first question, just to open things up a little bit. You say you were 36 when you realised you were white.
Yes.
That's a statement that will stop a lot of people in their tracks, particularly when I ask that. So what happened? How did that change the way you saw yourself and the world around you?
Yeah. Yeah. And just for context, actually, that line came about. That is the opening line of my TEDx talk.
Is it? Right,
yeah,
okay.
because it was one of those moments in my life where I was thinking, like, how do I kind of start off all the things that I want to say? And exactly as you asked me about a pivotal moment, I thought to myself, what is the pivotal moment that made me arrive where I have? And it's true. It was when I was 36, I was listening to a podcast, and I had this kind of moment of realization that all of my life experiences to date were shaped in such a way that they were the kind of experiences that I would have as a white woman. And I had absolutely no frame of reference for experiences that lived outside of that. And the podcast I was listening to, and which in and of itself I've had to do some work to think about, was a Russell Brand podcast called Under the Skin. And I used to listen to a lot of those because he interviewed some amazing guests. And this particular guest was Professor Kehinde Andrews, who at the time was the Professor of Black Studies at Birmingham University. And he was talking about his experiences and the course that he runs. And the things he was talking about were so outside of my own frame of reference. I realised that there's this whole aspect of life that other people experience that I just didn't understand, and it wouldn't have crossed my mind to think that the world was that way. And that really then started me, like I say, curiosity magpie, to start questioning, okay, where else does this show up? And so when I say, you know, I was 36 years old when I realised I was white, it doesn't mean I didn't look in a mirror, like I owned a mirror. But what it means was, it was what that meant, what the whiteness part of my identity meant, and where that maybe shielded me from experiences that other people who aren't white were having.
Got you. It's really, I sort of find that really fascinating, I suppose, because I had a lady, or a woman called Shani, who worked for me, a young woman called Shani, who worked with me at Flagship, and she's Indian. She's still Indian. She no longer works for me. So when I speak in the past tense, it isn't that she's not Indian anymore. But there was an eye opener. She had been working with us for probably 4 years before I really understood the difference between my internal representation and some of the experiences she had, and how some things that I just perceived as easy because the door would open made me realise sort of quite how privileged I was, probably from a male perspective, but also being a white male from a white male perspective in the UK at this time, working in the sector we were working in. It took me a little while for the cog to kind of click into place it wasn't necessarily, I think for some time I'd probably thought it was just an age thing rather than anything else. So yeah, I found that quite fascinating.
And that, I mean, you've kind of hit upon the thing there as well. It's never any one aspect of our identity when we're having these conversations. It's all of the aspects of all of the things that make us who we are. And that's a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, which is called intersectionality, which is we are the combination of all of the aspects of our identity that make us who we are, and you cannot uncouple them. But it's just in some scenarios you will be faced with certain privileges, and like you say, there will be barriers that don't exist, and in other scenarios there might be. And I think it's acknowledging that, like, the playing field isn't level, and it's contextual. It's going to change depending on what is the thing that we're trying to achieve, and who, if I'm part of, I can be part of a majority in one space and part of a minority in another space, and that can shift.
Fascinating. I wondered if there was a question there around understanding, because I'd never really thought about minority and majority sort of together, and the fact that we sometimes spend a lot of time talking about a minority rather than a majority, and it was just interesting putting those two words together. I wondered if there was a question there, but I'm not sure there is. I'm not sure there is. I was just reflecting for a moment. So many leaders avoid difficult conversations. I avoid difficult conversations. So I'm just going to make that, admission. And it's because we're afraid often of saying the wrong thing. And it's often because we're afraid of the response or the reaction that we'll get. In your experience, what's the bigger risk today? Saying the wrong thing or actually not saying anything at all? Yeah,
and I guess that's the question, isn't it? I'm going to caveat that with, when you talk about the risk, and there's actual risk and there's perceived risk, and it's the actual risk to yourself, and there is the actual risk to someone else, or the perceived risk to yourself or to someone else. So as with all of the things, unfortunately, if there was any clear-cut answer to that, this would be a really short podcast, and I'd just say, here's the secret, let's go and do it. It doesesn't work like that.
Oh, really? Damn.
I know, sorry.
Guys.
Where's the downloadable PDF and we can all go home? No, it is, and that's the reason why difficult conversations are so flipping difficult, because they are complex and contextual. So more often than not, we create stories, right? And I talk a lot about how do we know whether or not we're a good or a bad person, right? Because when we create these narratives in our head, half the time is, well, I don't want to try and say the wrong thing, get it wrong, then I'm going to be labelled with an ista and ism, and then I'm a bad person. So we have this whole narrative mapped out about what's going to happen if I do this thing. And actually, we have to then look at, well, what are the stories we're telling ourselves that underlie that? And half the time, if we just kind of said, I have to have a conversation with you, I don't know how to say this correctly, so I'm going to give it my best go, and then can we talk about it? Like, we don't often approach conversations with this sense of vulnerability in that way. We come in thinking, I'm supposed to know how to have this conversation, And if we really, I can give it an example from my own life. Like I talked about working in petrochem. A lot of the time I was thinking through, okay, how do I bring people who are different and not represented into this space? And one of the things I was really proud of was with my team within our organisation. I had a team that was representative of people from multiple genders and multiple ethnicities. And I was really proud of having created that. And yet I also had to sit with the idea that even within my team, within our UK operation, I had the only 2 black men in my team for our whole kind of makeup in our company. And they reported into me as a white woman. And part of me could say, well, that's great, isn't it? Because I created this diverse team. But also I have to acknowledge I wasn't having conversations with them directly about how did they still feel about being representative of the only 2 black men in this organisation? How did they feel reporting into me as a white woman who was kind of fighting my own battles and having my own issues within the business? Like, we weren't having that level of conversation. And we weren't having it because I wasn't aware at that time around kind of the different challenges that would have been faced by each of us. But even if I had have been aware, would it have been as easy of going, well, I know this, now I'm going to have that conversation? Probably not, because I would have been scared. Like, well, if I start this conversation, what if I say something racist? What if I kind of get the wrong end of a stick or try to start this discussion and I don't know where it's going to go and I can't handle it? So even if I'd have known that that conversation should have taken place, I probably would have avoided it because I wouldn't have wanted that negative impact. But in that example, when we talk about kind of what's the risk, okay, I might be saving myself from the risk of doing something that's going to get me potentially into hot water or have a complaint made about me. But all I'm doing is putting my own ego and my own comfort ahead of my team. So is that the right thing to do? Or actually, could they have been willing to engage with me if I'd approached it in the way of saying, I feel like there's a conversation to be had here and I don't know how to have it. Can we work together to figure out what needs to be done so that you are seen and respected and you're getting everything you need to have your needs met? So, it could have been really different. And I do think back to that dynamic thinking, a lot of us went in with really good intentions thinking we were doing the best that we knew how to, but there wasn't any real dialogue to make sure that was true.
Sure. Oh, how do I unpack that?
There's a lot, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And I guess it was interesting your use of ism because that is the fear, isn't it? The fear that sort of holds people back is that they're going to end up with a grievance, or I guess the question lends itself to, because the fear is there's going to end up being a complaint or a grievance, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the question I'm interested to ask is, particularly with the HR background, so I can ask you this: does our strategy around managing complaints and grievances lend itself to being able to have these conversations? Like, does the system support it, or does it actually detract from it in that sense?
So, as again, I'm going to give the it depends answer, right?
Yeah,
because
sure.
it depends on the organisation and how you manage your processes. So I would say, formal grievance processes are there for a reason, because you have to have the capacity to have a documented procedure for someone to feel that they will be heard and fairly represented throughout, and there has to be a documented trail of evidence for that. So they absolutely need to be there. But we all know before anything gets to a grievance, there will always be multiple, usually missed opportunities to have an informal conversation. Because essentially, when I think about grievances and complaints, it's simply just someone's needs have not been met. For someone to get to the point where they want to raise a grievance, they have an unmet need. So what are the conversations that are taking place before that, where you're trying to figure out who needs what and how do those needs get met? Because not everything's going to be kind of tied up nice and neatly with a bow in terms of a resolution, but half the time just being heard is enough for people to feel like they're starting to get their needs met. So I think if we got better at having difficult conversations before we get to the more formal processes, you can resolve so many things. But then again, that relies on people's capacity to want to have a curious conversation with someone who maybe is having a different experience. I mean, I've had conversations within the HR space with other HR people. I'm in a lot of HR communities, and statements get made like, oh, we had a complaint come in where someone alleged that one of our directors had done something racist, but obviously it was unfounded. And I'm like, obviously. I mean, we immediately see your prejudice around you wanted to find the outcome that nothing was taking place, because if your experience of that person isn't that they've never done anything to you, or they haven't got a racist bone in their body, like, how do we know if you're not
you
a
mimic
person...
that like you've heard it before?
Yeah, I mean, I may have, but or, oh, not him, he hasn't got a sexist bone in his body. Like, we hear all of these things, but actually it kind of doesn't matter. And we talk about the difference between intention and impact, and most of us go into everything with good intentions. Like, very few people, unless you're a complete psychopath, get up in the morning and think, I'm going to cause carnage today. Like, no one's doing that. We're all going into work thinking, I've got a job to do. I would like to enjoy doing my job today. I'd like to not have to think about the fact that I had to nag my kids 5 times this morning to brush their teeth and put their shoes on. I want to leave that alone. I want to come to work. I want to do my job, have some great conversations. We're going to get some stuff done. We're going to sell some stuff, and go home again. Nobody wants to go in and have those awful conversations, but sometimes they're needed. And how can we, when we're faced with those, start to put our own kind of belief systems to one side and just listen? And one of the terms I trot out quite frequently is, how can we listen like we're wrong? Because actually it's a really good starting point. If you can just park everything that you think you know for just a minute and just listen fully to another human about their experience and what's going on for them, and what does that make you think or feel, and what questions do you have to be fully present for them with their challenge, their problem, without then layering in the other, if it's a complaint about another human, like, without layering in, okay, but I know that person, they'd never be like that, they'd never mean that. Because there's nothing worse, is there, when you kind of say, like, oh, I was a bit offended by this, and someone kind of shuts you down by saying, oh, I know them, they'd never mean it like that. Well, sure, it doesn't make me feel any better. So it's just having that space held for you to just be. So I think there's a lot that can be kind of learned from informal conversations prior to getting to those grievance spaces where we just listen to each other.
Sure. Is there a reality that, regardless of people's backgrounds, that they naturally are going to grow up, because they've got beliefs, therefore they must have biases, and there must be some isms and some ists, unintentionally, almost. Well, not necessarily. Well, I suppose unintentionally, because they're unconscious. Yeah. So when people say, "Oh, well, they've not got a racist bone in their body," or they've not, they're not sexist at all. The reality is they can still be a good person, or a largely a decent good person. Yep. But the reality is that life or their environment that they've grown up in has resulted in a set of beliefs that they probably haven't realised, and is unconscious and has an ist or an ism.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, I can, even now, with everything I know about all of the stuff I know out, because I have immersed myself in this for, best part of a decade, I still don't know everything about everything. So I'm still always open to the fact that I will get something wrong. Like, there is absolutely going to be times where someone will need to come and have a chat with me, and people do as well. So it's also making space where I know within at least the people that I have in my friendship circles, and actually more broadly, because I've had some people on LinkedIn reach out to me for conversations. Like, I make it okay, and I make it safe for people to come to me and say, can we talk about this thing that you were talking about? Because actually I have an issue with that, and I'm always going to listen because I want to know more. I don't always have to agree, because it's okay to disagree on something, but I can at least acknowledge that somebody else sees the world differently to me, and I can choose to do something with the information or not. But coming back to your point, I mean, I get a bit shuddery when I think about unconscious biases, because they are obviously a thing. They absolutely do exist. But I also think the term unconscious bias now has become a bit loaded, in that we're so used to having had our unconscious bias training, and we've been through the courses, and it almost arms people to think like, oh no, I've done my course now, so I know that I don't have any unconscious biases. And it's just not, that's not how they work. But whenever I talk about them, I like to talk about them in terms of implicit versus explicit biases. And explicit biases are those things where, you know, people have overt views that they're happy to share externally, regardless of how you feel about them. That's their belief system and they're sticking to it. And they don't have to necessarily be the kind of the ones that make us uncomfortable. It could just be like, I have a bias against chocolate because if I eat too much chocolate, I'm going to get fat. Like it could be just something explicit. Like I have a belief that if I take my HRT every day, I'm probably going to be a nicer person to everybody. Like these are just explicit belief systems that we have. But then there are the implicit biases, and that's where unconscious bias lives. And implicit biases are the things that happen kind of more subtly within us, and those take the form of either, oh God, I've got a mind fart again now with menopause. You're either unwilling or unable. So it's like the unable is where an unconscious bias sits. So I've got an implicit bias and I'm unable to notice it. So that's that small kind of percentage where it's going to happen within me. Like you say, I'm a product of my environment. I grew up in the way I grew up. I was socialized. I had the people around me. That's my frame of reference. And maybe I don't know what lives outside of that. That's my unconscious bias. But then there's also the unwilling, which is the thoughts that go on in our head. We know that there are biases, but we'd never say them out loud to anyone else.
Sure.
And we all have those as well. Like, you know, the amount of times I've kind of talked to people when they have a CV come across their desk and someone's name is really difficult to pronounce. And you might somehow find the opportunity to interview somebody else who was equally qualified. And if we had to choose, we're going to go with this person whose name I can pronounce. Like that's a bias. You are biased against that person, but you wouldn't probably say that out loud to anybody. You just do that quietly. So biases are way more complicated than just the ones that live out loud and the ones that we don't know about.
Makes sense.
And I think that's something that it's always useful for people to kind of sit with a little bit, because actually it's those unwilling ones I think are the ones that we need to start pressing on like a bit of a bruise.
Got you. I love that. Makes sense. Overtly. Yeah, and explicit. So externalized and internalized. Yeah, nice. No, like it. Business owners, many business owners tell me they feel they're constantly walking on eggshells and worry they'll accidentally offend somebody. How can leaders create inclusive workplaces without creating a culture of fear?
Yes. And again, well, here's the downloadable PDF that doesn't exist because there isn't a one size
Sorry,
fits
I don't
all.
mean my questions to sound that way.
No, but it's true, right? Because that's the question everybody wants to know. Because let's face it, again, coming back to that example, we don't go to work, especially if we're a business owner or a senior leader, we don't want to open up that can of worms in our organisation. We don't want to get things wrong. We don't want to upset people. We don't want to offend people. But by the same token, we all have opinions and we need to get stuff done, right?
Yep.
And it is, I can understand how at the minute people do feel a bit like you can't say anything these days. And it is a little bit like that. And even I feel this in my own industry when I think about the DEI work that happens, and which is why I do things differently. I don't want to be that person with the waggy finger saying, oh, you've got that wrong. You've got that wrong. Like, it doesn't help anybody. But it's, again, about being able to have the type of conversation where if you're the kind of leader that's going to do your best, people will hold grace and space for you to say, okay, we knew what you were getting at when you said that. This is how it landed. And if you're then the type of person that hears that and goes, okay, I didn't mean it like that, let me try that again, you know, and it becomes more of a dialogue, because I don't believe in kind of prescripted ways of telling people this is how you do this is how you do that, because that's only as good as it is for the moment that, and sometimes the briefest of moments, that it's relevant. And as we know, language evolves and changes, society's perspectives on things evolve and change. I'm more interested in how do we understand how we arrived at where we've arrived at currently, and the reasons why some of these conversations are difficult, the reasons why we're a bit twitchy about some of the things to talk about. Because if we can understand the how we got here, we can equip ourselves with the skills for, well, when it continues to change and shift as we go along, I still know that I can navigate that because I understand like the way in which society and humanity evolves and the interactions evolve, and I know where I stand on all of that, because I'm a real firm believer as well in, like, especially if it's your business, if you're a business owner, it's your business. You run it however the hell you like. You get to make decisions. You set the tone of the culture. As far as I'm concerned, with the clients I work with, at least, it's my role to help you understand, if you're going to run it in that way, here are some things you might be opening yourself up to. Here are some things you might want to know that maybe you didn't know. And if you choose to stand 10 toes down on some of your beliefs that maybe society won't be okay with, that's fine. But you also do that knowing there could be consequences to that, and where you may come unstuck somewhere down the line, whether it's legally or just, a bit of a story on the Daily Mail or whatever, like something may happen. But everyone's a grown up, right? We're all entitled to feel the way we feel about things. I just think people should have access to the best information to make their own mind up about how they feel about things.
Love that. I really struggle to respond to the stuff you said, because it's so articulate and intelligent, and I'm like, how do I respond?
I mean, you
to
can
this?
disagree as well. This is the other thing. Like, I one of my favourite things is also when I meet people with completely opposing views, because I want to hear about that. Like, I want to be challenged. Because that helps me, and it helps me to either go, gosh, I've thought this all the time, and actually you make a really good point. I need to think about that. Or sometimes it just gives me the opportunity to nod and smile and go, yeah, I hear you and I understand what you're saying. And then it helps me articulate a better argument for myself in the future.
Sure. That makes sense. One of the things that I'm trying to view the lens is through what I perceive the listeners might be asking behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And that's, I suppose, as my job is to try and represent them as best I can. Yeah. But at the minute we're doing good.
Let's think. I mean, because you gave the example there about eggshells, right? And some of the things I'm thinking about when people are talking about the eggshells piece, like at the minute, I feel, and again, this is with some of the business owners that I work with, there is a lot of men that are really scared about, I'm not sure what to say. I want to show up. I want to do the best thing I can. I don't know what to say in these scenarios. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to act in the way that I would like to act, or maybe that I have acted in the past. I want to be able to run my business, but I also don't want to take up space, because I'm being told as a man I take up too much space. But I also understand, like, this is my job and I have to be a leader. So I'm being told to step up, and I'm also being told to shut up at the same time. And like, I can see why that does create that environment where people are thinking, I don't know what to say. And I talk about this in my personal life as well, with my friends and family, like my dad, my partner. Like, we have the types of conversations where they're saying, like, I don't know how to get this right. And that is a tricky one. And what I would also say is, like, men, your voices are needed too. So let's not forget that. When I talk about inclusion, I talk about inclusion for everybody, and it's not at the expense of anybody. So it's not about kind of drowning out one voice with another. It's about making sure that all voices are heard. So there is a great power in when you can understand why certain voices need to be elevated. It makes it easier for you to feel less like you're kind of walking on eggshells or minimizing yourself. You can think, actually, do you know what? I know what I think about this, but I'm going to give the floor to someone else first, hear some more views, and then if I still feel the way I feel, I can wade in afterwards. And I think there are ways in which you can make sure you're not silenced, and you can also feel empowered to contribute, that also don't involve shutting down other people. But I can also, I have a lot of empathy and understanding for how some people do feel like, well, I don't know where I fit anymore, because I think that's a narrative that also gets pushed in some spaces.
Yeah, of course. I think that the challenge I come across a lot is this sort of masculinity challenge around. I think men starting to feel slightly or believe they're being marginalised, I suppose.
Yeah.
What do I think? What do I think the question is there? I think that there's an element of feeling maybe overlooked or pushed down a little bit. What do you think to that?
I mean, I guess my immediate feeling is, if that's how someone feels, that's how someone feels, right? And who am I to minimize that?
Sure.
That's not, if that is how someone is feeling, they are absolutely valid in feeling that way. I think it's what we do with it then, and the sources of inspiration that we take from, to help us feel like we can take up space, or maybe to feel like we can find a way through. I mean, like I gave the example, and I listened to the Russell Brand podcast, right? I've had to do some real reckoning with that, because there was someone who, from my perspective, in those moments was very educational for me in terms of having the podcast. And it was like, he used his platform, brought great education to me. And at the same time was a deeply problematic human. And you have to kind of reckon with, like, nobody is all good or all bad. But it's when we then start thinking about, we're creating spaces where in this example, perhaps a man feels like they're made to feel all bad. Like, and we know that that's not true by simply your existence as a man. That's just not the case. And then it's about how do we tap into the type of masculinity and the type of ways that men can claim space, because everybody's entitled to do that. And I think sometimes we run the risk of this kind of pendulous swing back to, okay, the only correct way to be a man is to be dominant and asserting and put your foot back down, when actually, is that, because that's kind of basically making this assumption that all men are the same, which we know is not true. So where is the space for the spectrum of men and the individuality of all of those people that fall into the category of man? Because I think, when we lean too heavily into one type of being a man, it excludes so many people, and that is also unhelpful. And we talked, much earlier about intersectionality. Well, that applies to men too, right? Because you've got men of all races, we've got men with disabilities, like neurodivergent men, like gay men. Like, there is this whole spectrum of what being a man means. So there is no kind of right way, and even if you are the kind of guy that falls into the category of you're a straight white cisgendered man, like, you are allowed to exist too. Like, that everybody should feel like they're included. So yes, maybe historically you face less barriers, and you won't likely have known that. That's the other thing. It's not your fault. But it's just about understanding, why do some of the other conversations need to get a bit of airtime, but not at the expense of you feeling valid as a human. There's a reason why the rates of men over 40 and 50 taking their own lives are so high. Like, it's that kind of being squeezed out, not having anywhere to take your challenges, because the world's narrative laid on you is you have to be a certain type of way to be a guy.
Sure.
And that's not helpful, right? Not helpful.
No, not helpful at all. This episode of It's Not So Lonely at the Top podcast is brought to you by InSlap Mastermind and Coaching. If you're tired of trying to solve everything alone, this is your room. InSlap Mastermind brings together ambitious leaders who want to grow their business, level up their thinking, and build a like-minded community to support their growth. InSlap is strategy, it's accountability, it's growth and community, with no fluff and no BS. To find out more, connect with me, Pete Rushmer, on LinkedIn, or visit inslat.co.uk. I was just umming and ahhing about whether to take it towards the current rhetoric in the politics at the moment around the Henry Novak case, but I think I might give it a steer. I might give it a steer away from that. Probably because I'm not well enough informed on what's going on. You've spent years helping organisations navigate difficult and divisive topics. What's been the hardest conversation you've ever had to facilitate, and what did it teach you?
Ooh.
Or the hardest one that comes to mind? And I put you on the spot.
Yeah. I think there are several, really. I think one of them that really stands out is a piece of work I did quite a while ago now, and it was kind of when we started having what I had to interview conversations with pretty much everybody in their workforce. They were kind of a very small business. There was maybe like 30 people. I interviewed every single person on staff because they knew they had some challenges. They had a couple of complaints, and they had a new CEO who at the time said, I think something more insidious is going on and I don't know where it's coming from, and something doesn't feel right. Can you help me? I interviewed every single person, and he was not wrong with his gut feeling. There were lots of challenges came out, sexist challenges, racist challenges, and the most difficult part of it was a lot of it resided at board level. Ooh. And then it was, how do you address that? Because the kind of consensus was like the behaviours were being exhibited among the general staff, which is where the complaints had come from a few of the individuals. But actually it was just indicative of the greater culture that was being championed at board level. And that was a really challenging conversation to have to play back and say, here's kind of the landscape that, as I see it as an external person from the conversations I've had, this is what it looks like. What would you like to do with that? Because there's also that piece of work around, by the time I come in, most organisations know that something is afoot. Like there's a reason that they get in touch with me, generally when they want that type of work. So they know something's coming, but it's then, if we're going to do this piece, this is a conversation I always have up front. If you're going to do this piece of work, when we pop that lid off, something's coming out and you can't put it back in. So are you ready,
you ready
for whatever
this?
comes out? Because there will be an expectation if you're asking people to share their deepest, darkest experiences. As we all know, the worst thing you can do is you run a survey or you do any piece of work. People tell you what they really feel and then you do nothing with it. Sure. Like that's just culture wipeout, right? So that was the kind of conversation, like, what would you like to do with this and how seriously do you want to take it? Because I can write you all the reports in the world, but if nothing changes, all that's going to do is signal to your staff, oh, okay, you're going to side with the people that are behaving that way because that's actually the culture that you want. So that was a really tricky conversation. But to this CEO's credit, he doubled down and he did absolutely everything he could to tell people, like, I stand with you, I hear you, which, to be fair, as a new CEO was slightly easier for him than someone who had been established and also could potentially have been part of the problem as well. Sure. But it was a real big gamble that he took. But it really paid off, actually. The people that I speak to now still that have worked for him and have gone on to move other places still speak so highly of him. Because he showcased who he was as a leader and as a human.
It's a really interesting case for me to sort of poke around that there, because one of the things I like to ask around is sort of, the principle side of leadership. So what is that principle? So a principle is essentially like a belief that we then take action on because we're aligned with the principle. What was that principle that he aligned with? Was it the truth or doing what was right, or what was the underpinning principle that you believe he had?
I think for him, actually, it was just this, I think it did come down to this deep sense of a belief to want to do the right thing. But I think for him, the right thing really centered around, he felt like a few people had brought him examples that made him deeply uncomfortable.
Got you. Yeah.
And the idea of not addressing it sat really badly for him. And I think it was that kind of playback moment of, like, if my daughter came home and said this was happening to her at work,
sure.
If my son had said that this was the thing that got shared in the office and how he's just like, this isn't the type of people who I believe we should be. So from him, it was really very values led. And like you say, actually, it was the action then that came with that. It was he could have been very disappointed about it. He could have just given a talk to say, these are our values and we'll put them on a poster on the wall. But he didn't. He was like, we need to understand where this comes from and why people think this is okay and how have we got away with it for so long.
Sure.
So he really did root cause analysis as well is something I talk about a lot. I'm a bit of a science geek a lot of the time. So I like to think about process and these and I'm like, for me, root cause analysis is a huge thing. Like, where do some of these kind of things that we've normalized within our cultures come from? Because they'll come from somewhere. And are you okay with that? Or would you like to change it?
Interesting. I love going through it. Because flagship exists in the compliance space, it's really interesting because we talk a lot about finding the root cause.
Yeah.
What's the real reason? What's the truth?
Do your 5 whys,
what's the truth, right?
Yeah, and is that the truth consistent as well for everybody? Because that's something else that exists. You'll have, I love it when I get leaders that go like, "Oh, I've got an open door policy. Like, everybody can come to me." I'm like, "Yeah, but do they?"
Yeah.
Because if people are genuinely coming to you, then that's grand. But is it just the same people that come to you, and are they the mouthpiece for other people? And all these things are little pieces of information, aren't they, that tell you what's going on?
I was going to say, there's many a closed off leader that I've heard the words, "I have an open door policy." Okay, then.
Yeah, do
yeah, and you've also got the most unpsychologically safe space that I've ever met.
Yeah,
come across.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your door's open, but the force field is preventing anybody from stepping through it.
Yeah, exactly right. Cool. You mentioned about the internalized misogyny earlier, so I'm just going to pick up on that.
Yeah.
You openly talk about having to unlearn internalized misogyny, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
For listeners who may never have heard that kind of phrase before, what does that look like, and how do you realise that it was a problem?
Yeah. So sadly for me, I didn't realise until far too late. As is the case with a lot of things, right? Because when we're in the middle of something, we don't necessarily see it within ourselves. But so for me, if we think about misogyny, it is this general principle around, belief systems that center on kind of men being better than women, or various other carvings up of the way that works. And for me, the way that it worked is an internalized process. And this is why when I certainly talk about misogyny, I'm never assuming that it's just men, because I am a woman and I had internalized misogyny because I was a product of the environment that I worked in. So I worked in that petrochemical space. I participated in a lot of the banter and the goings on because I wanted to be part of the team. There's a term called assimilation, which is where you assimilate to the environment that you're in. So you become more like the people around you. So when we think about inclusion, that is when I come to work as who I am and I'm welcome for who I am and I still get to be me. But when you assimilate, it means you come to work, you look at what's going around you and you behave in the same way as everybody else, because that's what is, the kind of the sheep dip process of how we get a promotion here or how we have an easy life here. And I assimilated. And what I realized is I just behaved differently. I wouldn't speak up in the way that I would have usually spoken up. I did laugh at the sexist jokes. I made the sexist jokes. Like I participated in that culture. And it wasn't until I got out of it and I was in a different culture and I maybe continued to behave in that way and people were looking at me like, why would you say that? And I was like, that's a really good question. Why would I say that? And I had to then sit and think about all of the ways that I was showing up and really unpack that. And it was deeply, deeply uncomfortable, because then when I think back, like I would sit in my office at work and say, like, we need to increase representation of women. We need to make it easier. Like when I think about mess facilities on site, right? The welfare cabins are brought in, all the guys could get changed. I couldn't. I was the only woman, or at best like one of 2 or 3 women. And we'd have to crouch down behind a desk somewhere to get our coveralls changed or whatever, knowing full well that anyone could walk around the back of the porter cabin and look in a window. But we just did it, right? Because why would we want an organisation to spend some money to get us a cabin of our own? Why would we do that? And the answer is we should have done that. But these little things that we sort of just accepted, and it's just really interesting. And I used to dress like with the polo shirt and jeans in the same way as all the other guys. I wouldn't paint my nails. Because half the time on site it would be pointless anyway, but I didn't want to be perceived as being a woman. Because if you were too, if I was going to be looked at as being too girly, it would undermine my credibility.
Sure.
Now, even with reflection, having done the work, that's probably true. That probably would have had a negative perceptive impact for me. But I didn't test it. I just assumed that would be the case. So I changed my behaviour, which means any women coming in after me would see me behaving in that way. And then they would think that that's what I have to do, right? So there was no challenging the system. So, and I didn't push back on some of the behaviours, like the conversations I had where people assumed I slept with people to get the job, because how else would I be qualified to do that? Yeah. Which then led for them to think that I might be fair game, that they could sleep with me, which led to some really awkward conversations with people. And it's that kind of stuff. And rather than do anything about that, you just laugh it off.
Sure. Just
laugh off these advances and laugh. At one point I had a stalker and everybody thought it was hilarious. And I laughed it off too.
Oh, wow. And
it wasn't until afterwards I looked back and I went through that. I had the support of my assistant manager. She was amazing. But that was it. That was the only support I had through that whole experience, and everybody just thought it was funny, and I had to play up that he's hilarious, and it's not. So it's it's things like that. Yeah, I really had to. So when I talk about internalized misogyny, I talk about like the beliefs that I held within me that not only were not productive and healthy for me, but they were also not productive and healthy for any of the women that were around me, because I was just perpetuating the same things.
And it's interesting. So assimilation, it sounds like I often use the analogy of like the apple in the fruit bowl that is maybe starting to turn a little bit, and then it starts to affect the other apples. That's assimilation, isn't it? When the person becomes the environment, so to speak.
Yep, exactly that. We all rot together.
And so I'm interested. So you, to essentially fit in, you aligned with the environment. One of the things that I observe that is quite common in sort of some of our clients, for example, and not all, and it'd be on occasion I've come across women in senior positions in transport, for example, which is a male-dominated environment. Okay. Sometimes being what I believe is particularly hard-nosed, when my belief is that probably they're not really like that, but they feel a need to want to be hard-nosed, so they're taken seriously. What is that? Is that
that was me firstly?
Is that
right,
what that is? Right.
So I'm gonna yes and this, because there's a couple of things there. The first thing I want to call out though is there is a set of behaviours that would have been kind of showcased, I guess, to be this is what success looks like. Sure. And when men do it, they're assertive, they're getting on with it, they're just doing their job. And when women do it, we're hard-nosed. Right. So
I realise there's something in there from what I pointed out, because I know that in deep down there's probably an experience where women tend to be less hard-nosed than men anyway. So I kind of see my prejudice there as well.
Yeah, but here we go. So we're talking about this is the kind of that implicit bias, and this is sometimes we're not able to see it because our brains are kind of saying there is an incongruence in the behaviour of, we expect women to behave in X way, we see them behaving in a different way. So the assumption is, well, like that, those two things don't fit together. She should be smiley and nice and kind because this is what women are. She is none of these things, therefore she is hard-nosed. Whereas if you're a guy, you're just an assertive guy getting on with his job, even though it's the same behaviours. So there's that piece. So we've got kind of handle that, and there will also be men in that environment that will be behaving in certain ways that maybe they are softer, kinder people, and they can't show up as themselves either, because that's also not what success looks like, right? So they're not given the opportunity to actually platform some of their other leadership skills that could be used in a space. So it works both ways. And I guess there is an assumption there that, a woman outside of that environment might behave quite differently. And that's quite probably true. In my case, it absolutely was. I was a very different person outside of work than I was in work. But it also might not be. I mean, maybe that person was just a real assertive badass. And that's okay. They can be like that in their entire life because that's just who they are. But it's interesting when you talk about the assimilation piece, it is likely that we just mimic the behaviours, but then we get labelled differently depending on who we are in what space. But yeah, and that's why when you kind of bring it back around, like that's why when we think about our interactions and we think about the whole, I mean, I know people like to think when we talk about diversity, equity and inclusion, we call it woke and we banner it and whatever. But actually at the heart of it, if we think about inclusion is simply all of those people can come to work as themselves and bring all of the aspects of themselves that contribute to the best, most productive team with the most amount of perspective and insight that is going to give the business or the organisation the greatest chance of success and all of those individuals the greatest chance of success. And I know as soon as we start talking about DEI, people get twitchy, but that in essence is what this is. Like it's about making space so that everybody wins.
I've massively gone off piste with my questions, but let's go with it because we talked about isms and ists, and I've thought of a question and I've probably not filtered it well enough, so I'm just going to say
go
it
with
out
it.
loud.
This is the time to do it, then, right?
I'm just going to say it out loud whilst we're talking about misogyny and sexism and whatever it may be.
My favourites.
So, feminism. Where does that land? Where does this land when it comes to, I don't know, being something that's positive or negative, I suppose. It came to mind because we were talking about being hard-nosed or feeling and needing to be hard-nosed. So where does feminism land in that from an equity perspective and equality perspective?
So interestingly, because I cannot give a straight answer. But when
I noticed.
I know, right? But come on, I love a conversation. This is my happy place, right? Why use 5 words when I can use 30? But when you think about feminism, I think most people, if I say imagine a feminist, right, it's going to be kind of some woman burning her bra and shouting in your face, and like this is where we go when we think about feminists. Actually, when we think about what feminism actually is, it's not about men versus women. A lot of people think like when if you're a feminist, it's just all about angry women shouting to reclaim something. It's not that. Feminism is simply about trying to make sure that systems work in this equitable way so that everybody has access, the appropriate amount of access to all of the tools and resources so that we each get a fair shot at the kind of life that we would all like to be living. So it isn't necessarily about I'm a feminist, but it isn't necessarily...
That was going to be one of my next questions. Where do you sit with this?
Yeah, I say this proudly. I am a feminist, and I not just because I think women should rule the world and men should sit down. Not at all. It's because I believe that everybody should have access. I believe that everybody has a valid opinion and everybody should be included. And we have to look at the structures and systems that are preventing that from happening, so that there's no kind of the benefit is not disproportionate among any one group. It should be that you can make something of yourself if in a way that you choose to make something of yourself. It shouldn't just be about a small minority of people that win, regardless of what those identity characteristics are. For me, it's not a gender thing, even though the language would suggest it is, but that's just where the roots of the movement, the feminist movement, came through. And to be very specific, so what I would class myself as is an intersectional feminist. When I think, because it is about all identity characteristics. It's not just, I'm not here just to say, I want women to get everything that we're owed, from that kind of traditional feminist, what people perceive to be a feminist view. I'm here to say, like, everybody should get what they need. And it's interesting because I talk a lot about patriarchy, and I'm not a fan of that. But patriarchy doesn't mean that I'm anti-man. I think from a lot of the things we've spoken about already, I'm absolutely not anti-man. Patriarchy simply is a system that favours the few over the many, and it is not helpful for a lot of people. Patriarchy is the reason that men come under fire if they want to cry or they want to talk about their feelings, or that, like the rates of people taking their own life. Like, that is patriarchy that is stopping, it harms men as well. Yeah. And I think that, and the opposite when people talk about matriarchy as being the potential opposite to that, it doesn't mean that you just replace women at the top of the head of everything as a system. It means it's a different system.
Yeah.
It's a circular system where everybody can win, rather than a linear system in patriarchy, which is where some people control all of the resources and everybody else just has to get what gets handed down.
So the opposite of feminism isn't masculinism, it's sexism. Is essentially the opposite.
Yeah.
Is the opposition of feminism is sexism.
Yeah.
Rather
Sexism
than,
or racism
rather than,
or all of those singular kind of belief systems where you think one group should dominate other groups.
Yeah.
Like, why would we think that? That doesn't make sense.
It's really interesting. Something you said properly resonated with me, and I'm probably going to regret saying it, but it really challenged me, and it's still playing in my head a little bit because I know I need to go and have a little meditate on it. Every individual has a valid opinion. Yeah. Really, really interesting. So that challenged me a little bit, because I think I just observed that in an ideal world, yes, but there's some underpinning belief, and it doesn't matter whether the individual, it doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, anything like that. Interestingly, there was a little voice inside my head going, but some people are idiots.
Some people are. But
and that was the little challenge in my head, that when you said that every individual has a valid opinion, my little head, and it diversified any other sort of hats, if that makes sense, other than some people are just idiots, I suppose, which then is a challenge for me, where my head went.
And every single person listening to this will have, we will have opinions.
Yeah.
And my opinion that certain people are idiots is a valid opinion for me. Right?
Okay,
based upon my frame of reference, my experiences to date. Like, as an example, it's probably no surprise I might cite people like Donald Trump and Andrew Tate as being people whom I'm not necessarily going to be values aligned with. Let's put it mildly.
Yeah.
However, regardless of how I feel about them, about their belief systems and their actions, I can also understand that they will have had experiences to date that have led them to arrive at where they have arrived at with their belief systems, and their view of what is right. And for whatever reason, they wholeheartedly throw their self behind that.
To some extent.
Yeah. And whilst I disagree, I'm also curious, because I want to know, well, what is it that happened within their lives that led them to that belief, like to feel that strongly about the things they feel so strongly about. So, whilst I wish they didn't have quite the platform and the levels of power that they have, and the capacity to influence people in the way that they do, because I think that's harmful. Again, that's just my opinion. I'm not going to kind of shut my ears to it. I want to know. I want to be curious about it, to go, well, what happened? Because actually, I think through the understanding of how they arrived at where they arrived at, we can learn a lot.
Yeah.
We can understand how to catch other people who maybe are going on that journey, to connect with them, to say, okay, what do you need for it not, for you to not be so full of hate for someone else? Like, how do we catch you before you get there?
Yeah, how do we model some more positive traits?
So because opinions, I was going to say something naughty then, but opinions are like a common body part, and we've all got one, right? So, and opinions are just opinions. They're just thoughts. They're just belief systems. Like, nothing. I say, like, I don't believe in good or bad people. I believe we have actions that are considered to be good and bad.
Yep.
But we're all humans, and I don't believe in like right and wrong. In the sense, I know that there are laws that govern our land that say things are right and wrong. But essentially, like, we do stuff. And even some of the most, I would say, virtuous or kind of well-meaning people, things happen, and you end up making choices or having to do things that might see you in a different perspective, or end you up on the wrong side of the law, or end you up in a difficult situation. And that's part of the beautiful complexity that makes us humans. Like, we all have free will. To some extent, and we have to navigate that and be responsible for ourselves and our actions. And who am I then to sit in judgment of somebody else's opinions and thoughts and views as if I have all the answers, as if I know the truth? Because
I also agree with that. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
If you could wave a magic wand and force every leader listening to confront one uncomfortable truth about themselves, what would it be?
I would actually do it slightly differently, and I would wave my magic wand and I would have every leader to sit and acknowledge their own uncomfortable truth that they know that they've been avoiding. I don't need to be the one to tell them. They know.
Got you.
They know. You all know. We all know. We all know that there's one thing we don't want to look at, or one thought process we've been hiding away from, or just one topic. Anything that gets you properly riled up, right? If I've said something throughout this whole conversation and you've gone, well, she's a pillock, that thing, right?
Yeah.
Sit with that thing.
Yeah.
And often one of the exercises I do with people is I talk about 3 different frames of reference. So it's like me, us, and we. And the starting point is always to sit with your own me frame of reference, which is your own kind of way that you see the world, and how is that influenced by who you are and where you grew up and your education system and what you know and who your parents were. And like, spend a bit of time really sitting with, who are you? Why do you think the way you think? Why do you believe the things you believe? How did you get to where you got to? And what are those moments in there that have shaped how you see the world, and how might other people see it differently to you? And do a bit of work, just being like, okay, be curious and step outside your comfort zone and see what's going on with that.
Love that. You said one day people will look back at us and say they didn't know better, just as we do with previous generations. If we were to look ahead 25 years, what do you think future generations will struggle to understand about how we behave today?
Yes. And I firmly believe this, right? And this is one of the absolute conversations I have so often, right? People are, it's a different time back then, wasn't it? It was a different time. We didn't know better then, as if that just explains it all away. And I'm like, if that was the case, we would have fixed all of the world's problems now. Like, we've had a couple of, we've had millennia, right, that humans have existed. Like, we've had a go. We still cock stuff up. So if it was just as simply as the passage of time, we would have solved so many issues. So I love when we have those types of questions. I actually, through part of my own CPD, I did last Monday a British Empire and its legacies course, right? So I'm deeply into trying to understand like capitalism and colonialism and how did we arrive at where we've arrived at, so that I can better understand what's going to come next. And this was one of the conversations we had, which was around, but it was a different time then when we were talking about the enslavement of millions of Africans, right? So it was a different time then, people didn't know better. And my question is always, okay, but if we took what we knew now and we went back then, what would we like people to do differently? Because we would like to think then with our enlightened minds, we would do something different. And then imagine that now, exactly as you just said, now at some point is going to become then. So actually, if someone from the future was going to come back to us now and say, here's some stuff you need to know, what would we think about the times we're in now? And what would we do differently now, so that we can actually be proud of our actions? Because there's no point relying on the fact that in the future my great-great-grandkids will go, but she was a product of her time and she didn't know better. Like, I should know better. I should try to know better. So if I think about, what was the question? What if we look to 25 years in the future?
What are they going to say in 25 years? What are the future 25 years people say about us today? What is it they're going to say? What do you think that could be?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if we think about the wars and the genocides and things that are going on in the world right now, there's some pretty serious way. I mean, as humans, it never ceases to amaze me, the capacity we have to literally inflict pain and suffering on each other. And I think people are going to look back at us and go, how could we live with ourselves knowing that a lot of the media was broadcasting 24/7 things that are happening both in our country and in other countries? Like, we have the privilege to look away, and we do. And I challenge people not to look away now, because I think we have to bear witness to things that are happening on all scales, right? Bear witness to that and think, if your grandkids were looking back at you, would they be proud of your behavior? You know, is being able to say, oh, I chose not to watch the news, I didn't know about that. Do you feel comfortable knowing that that's something you distance yourself from? And whilst as an individual, none of us have the power to fix this, right? We're all just singular humans. But actually, how can you influence that? What is going on in your business? I have had conversations with businesses recently where there is a huge spike in anti-Semitism. There's a huge spike in Islamophobia. How are you having conversations about that in your businesses? Whether it's people who are directly impacted or not, we all have friends and family around the world. Like, what's going on? What do people need to be talking about to feel safe in your business? How are you showing up? What charities are you backing and supporting? We're currently filming this. It's June. It's Pride Month. I am tired as a queer person myself. I'm tired of every June we slap a rainbow on something and we use it as branding because we want to be seen to be part of the in crowd. Although now a lot of businesses are distancing themselves because it's not cool to be queer anymore. But like how we can talk about that too. But how are you showing up to support your people in your business in the small ways that you can? Because collectively it's those small incremental things. As we all know, if you change 1% of something, eventually we get there, right? So the small incremental things that you can do now that might not make a difference in 25 years, but it might change the way that our future generations are speaking about us now. Because I want to be satisfied. I want my conscience. It's never going to be clear because I know that there's always more I can do. But I want to be able to say that I didn't look away, that I saw it and I did my best with what I could.
Yeah. Fascinating. It's interesting. There's a couple of things I really grapple with. And it's funny because you made me think about it. When I was a kid, I think 8 or 9, I got your coffee's going to be way cold now. I do apologise. I got a CD player. I think I was like 9 or 10. I was into Oasis at the time. It was probably about 96, something like that, which probably ages me.
You were only 9 or 10 then?
I was born in 86. Yeah, I'm 40. Yeah.
Now I feel old.
Sorry. But yeah, Oasis sort of Story Morning Glory. I remember going down. I don't know if my parents would remember this, but I remember going down. I was listening to my CD player, and I think it was like £100 or something for my birthday, which would have been a lot of money back then, a lot of money. And I remember feeling really guilty about it. I felt really guilty about it, and I lay in bed listening to music, and I got really upset. And I went down to my parents and I said, I can't keep it. I can't have this anymore. And they were like, why? Why is that? And I was like, and I think it was around that time that there'd have been a lot of like Live Aid stuff going on. And I was like, there's kids starving in Africa. I can't have this. It's too, it felt like it was too much, and it's interesting because that's always sat with me, along with so my brother was homeless for a while, and it was difficult, and it's a difficult thing for me to deal with because I always believed he had another choice, if that makes sense, but obviously he didn't feel he did. So there's a few bits around sort of poverty, homelessness, and potentially just like the things that we know go on, yet we do just continue to go about our own selfish business.
We walk on by.
Yeah, and we just go on about our own stuff. And I think there's probably something in that. I think that's probably, but it's not that easy also, if that makes sense. So I'm also aware that, it's not like, I was about to say, it's not like I can just down tools and just go and try and save the world, right? Yeah, fascinating. No. Interestingly, one of my last interviews was with a guy called Atik. Have you ever come across Atik from Peterborough? He just devotes his life to saving people. What he says, saving people. And what he means by saving people is he just shares like essentially messages about love and support and all of these positive things, and that is basically his job, as he just goes around trying to raise money, trying to raise support for different vulnerable people and that kind of stuff. So very interesting. What did I wince at?
Just we were taught it's not cool to be queer.
Not cool to
but
be
also
queer,
just back to your point, I want to just kind of I think there is a balance, right? Because I also trot out the term like protect your peace as well, because too much exposure to the horrors of the world can be absolutely overwhelming. And I know that some people can fall into the pit of like consuming too much of what's going on, and that is also destructive for your own mental health. So there is a balance around being present with the things that are happening, so that you're not denying their existence. You know, when we kind of look back, don't we, that there are Holocaust deniers and stuff, as if that didn't happen. You know, and I don't. We need to make sure we're in a position where we can say, do you know what? Yep, this stuff, it happened, and it happened on our watch in 2026.
Yeah.
And also knowing that you don't have to go down the complete. Don't watch all the graphic videos. Like if that's not needed for you to understand what's going on, like be careful to protect yourself, because I have to be honest, there are a lot of things that I have seen, and because of the circles I move in, that I have seen and I've witnessed, and things that I didn't realize a human could do to another human.
Sure.
And you can't unsee that, and you can't unknow that. That keeps me awake at night, knowing the things that people do to each other, which of course I won't talk about because I don't want other people's brains to be infected with it. But it's real and it happens, and some people right now are enduring those horrors, and that blows my mind. But now we'll segue to the cool to be queer comment that I made, so we'll just keep it light, right?
Yeah. Yes. What's the next question?
Well, I want to know why you winced when I said it's not cool to be queer anymore.
I don't know why. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Sorry, I'm not interviewing you, but I can't help it.
It was interesting. Why did I wince at it? I genuinely, I don't know, or I can't put myself on the spot enough to know why I winced at it. Okay, let me talk you through where I stand on it. It's not something I've put loads of thought into, which I probably should have done more so. I find it, so I would never do the rainbow thing with the flagship logo, because I think it's just a bit BS. I don't know why I think it's a bit BS, but I think it's just a bit, it just lacks any real genuine, it's just like a marketer's thing. It's a bit like, I don't know. I see why there's Pride Month, because there's people who are really anti-Pride. So there needs to be an education piece. So I support that. Do businesses really make any impact by doing the whole rainbow thing on their logo for a month? I just think it's a bit performative.
That is the word. I'm so pleased you said that, because that's the word. If you're
that's why I winced. I think it's a bit. I think business, the corporate thing, it's just performative. It's just like,
it can be.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It absolutely can be, and I think that's a really critical point. That if you're only putting the rainbow branding out there and you're doing it just for Pride Month, and you're doing absolutely naff all, that's performative, and it doesn't serve anybody other than make people feel even more ostracized. Yeah. Right? Because you're literally capitalizing on Pride Month without doing the work to support queer people. And I just want to caveat as well, I use the word queer because I'm an LGBTQIA+ person. I am okay with its use. Obviously, queer is a loaded term. It has been reclaimed by certainly the younger generation of LGBTQIA+ people. But I also want to just recognise there might be some people listening to this who are of a generation where that was a word that was loaded and weaponised against them. So I don't want to give you kind of like a terrible feeling in my use of that word, because I recognise as well, but it's a word that I use for and about myself as part of that community. If you know an LGBTQIA+ person, and you are, and it's not a word that you use, or you are not part of the community, please don't use that word about other people in the community, because again, some people, it's still quite a triggering word. So it's just to call that out there. But
sounds complex. Yeah. It sounds very complex. I don't know enough about it to probably be.
It's just a language and terminology thing. It's
language matters.
Cool. Yeah,
language matters. Language
and that's why
really
I say that, because for me, it's a word that I happily use about myself, and I don't want to not use it. But I do want to acknowledge that not everybody feels that way, and that's okay. Yeah. And I wouldn't use that word about anybody else because of the way that it might feel for them. And I'm, as far as I'm concerned, I'm fine with that. But I'm also happy for other people to say differently if they have a different opinion.
Sure. So, Do you know what? We have overrun. I normally try and keep it under an hour, but we've massively overrun. And I'm sorry. I hope I've not kept you from your dinner or anything.
No one can keep you from my dinner.
one final thought for me, I suppose, to add some value for listeners would be: is that the strategy, the sort of takeaway I'm taking from our conversation around approaching a difficult or challenging conversation is around having that vulnerability to go, I feel like we need to talk about this and I don't really know how to approach it, so I'm just going to do my best, and can you be patient? Is that kind of a good way to frame a difficult conversation?
Yes, and it's definitely a good way to start thinking about it. What I would say the step that comes before that is give some thought as to why it feels like a difficult conversation for you, because there will be something like the clues in the title. It's a difficult conversation. If it was just a conversation, you'd have had it. Yeah. So there's something about whatever that conversation is that is not sitting with you. It's giving you the fear. It's like you get the fear. Mm-hmm. What is it that's giving you the fear? And spend a little bit of time with that, because if the closer you can get to what is it specifically that worries you? Am I worried about I might not use the right terminology? Am I worried about another person's reaction? Am I worried that someone will make a complaint? And then think about, okay, well, if that's the thing that I'm worried about, how can you best set yourself up to say, I want to have a conversation about this. I don't know the right terminology to use, so I'm going to use the best that I think based upon what I know. Please, if we need to use something else, like one example is a lot of people ask me, like, is it okay to say black? Right? Yeah. Of course it is. Like if providing it's in context, providing it's relevant and it's part of the conversation you want to be having. And there are certain words, because language has evolved, that you shouldn't be using. And, if you go into a conversation and say, I'm doing this because this is my understanding, the best terminology to have for this conversation. If you as a person in my organization feel I should be doing something different, tell me and we'll make sure we share this more broadly and we all get on board with doing the right thing. There are ways to go about it, but you have to be clear about what it is you're talking about and why is that difficult for you to begin with, because then that helps you set up the terms for that conversation. And one of the biggest things is learn how to make a good apology, because I always talk to people about, it's not about if you get it wrong, it's about when you get it wrong. And one of the reasons I struggle less than a lot of people is I go into every conversation with the expectation I'm probably going to muck something up. Sure. And I know exactly how to apologize and own it when I do, and I know how to make reparations, and I know how to say sorry. So it takes a lot of the fear away from me, that I can connect with people, not just about getting it right, but I can connect with people when I get it wrong.
I love that. And I feel like I need to say, well, how do you do that?
What, make a good apology?
Yeah.
So quite simply, it's about one of the things I like to talk to people in my workshops is about how did you learn to apologize? Because if, like me, you were probably said, someone came to you and just said, say sorry. Yeah. And you go, sorry. And then they say, now say sorry like you mean it. Yeah. Right. That was the extent of which we were taught to apologize. Right. And everybody knows a crappy apology like that. Right. So it's about actually, if you want to make a good apology, the first step is always acknowledge that you have done something wrong. Yeah. Like acknowledge you've caused offense, acknowledge the harm that you've caused. I
hate the old I'm really sorry you feel that way.
I'm
like
sorry
the problem's still yours.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you took offense at what I said. Like, no, I've just told you I was offended. So how about like a genuine say, I'm really sorry that I said that. Like, if you need to caveat it, like, I'm really sorry that I didn't understand that was offensive. Okay, fine, but actually just I'm really sorry. And then kind of talk about, like, how can I fix this? Is there anything that I can do to put this right? Or please, can you help me understand why that landed the way it did? Because I don't want to do that again. Sure. And also make it okay that, like, another person, it isn't their responsibility as well to educate you always. Yeah. So most people will be happy to tell you why, but some people might not want to, depending on what you've done. And you have to be okay with that and go away and do a bit more work. But yeah, like, say sorry. And then the end of an apology is a personal thing as well, in the sense of once you have said sorry, like you mean it, you have really taken accountability for your actions and recognise where you've gone wrong and what you're going to do to fix it. The last step is always get over it, because a lot of the time we then turn it all about this internal sob story for ourselves, going back to the narratives, and we kind of beat ourselves up about it over and over and over again. And I've been in meetings where I've done something and then I spend the next 10 minutes in my own head thinking about what I've done and how I wish I'd said something different, and not paying any attention to what is then going on.
Sure.
And actually what we need to do is, when we've stuffed it up, get over it and don't do it again. Don't make it about you. Keep it about the other person.
Love that. And on that bombshell, I think it's time to end the podcast. Stop. Yeah, we have to stop. We have to stop. We're going to get kicked out of the studio in a minute. Katie, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a delight to be here.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming. And listeners, I hope you've enjoyed it too. See you on a future episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of It's Not So Lonely at the Top podcast. I hope today's conversation has given you something really valuable, whether it's an idea, a perspective, or even a reminder of your next step. If you enjoyed this episode, please do make sure you follow and subscribe and review with 5-star feedback. I also challenge you to share it with another business owner or leader who needs to hear it. If you want to go deeper, visit inslat.co.uk to find out more about our mastermind community and coaching. Until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and remember, it's not so lonely at the top.